Hello and welcome to the Avrum Rosensweig Show.
Welcome to one of the internet's best podcasts, where we dive deep into the lives of the extraordinary and fascinating people who leave an indelible mark on our world. Join us as we explore their captivating stories, remarkable achievements, and unique perspectives that shape history and inspire generations. Get ready to embark on a journey through the lives of inspiring people unlike any other.
There we go. Welcome back, folks. This is the Avrum Rosensweig Show. My name is Avrum Rosensweig, and I'm delighted to have you here watching. As you know, the show is all about really what it is. It's about honoring humankind, and it is so we do that by listening to people's stories, inspirational stories, and hopefully, what people can garner from that, take away from it, is that they are motivated themselves to find their zone, to find their gift, and to enhance their character as much as they possibly can, hence the world in which we live. So that's what this podcast is all about. As we said in the intro, courtesy of my friend Isaac, who developed that. I think it's a beautiful piece. We're one of the best podcasts on the internet. The internet doesn't know that, but they will soon. We are delighted to have with us today my very dear friend, Aaron Lightstone. How are you, Aaron?
Good, man. How are you? It's good to see you.
I am doing great, man. And I have to tell you, of all the people that I've interviewed, you are right up there, probably in the top, I don't know, 5.
Wow. It's an honor to have you say that.
One of my favorite interviewees, and also one of my favorite people. And here, let me tell you a little bit about who Aaron Lightstone is. Aaron is an award-winning recording artist, music producer, composer, educator, and music therapist. He's recognized for his innovative, collaborative, and cutting-edge approach in both his music and therapy work. He holds a master's degree in music therapy and has trained and collaborated, performed, and recorded with artists from many musical genres. He's a music producer, twice nominated for a Juno Award. He's the founding member of Jaffa Road, a phenomenal band, which we will touch on. And he's the co-founder of the Canadian Musicians Royalty Collection Initiative. And we'll talk about that as well. I think the point, Aaron, is that you always struck me as somebody who's very American. Do you know what I mean by that?
No, I don't know what you mean by that.
You know, I find that Americans, so many of them, are just motivated to achieve as much as they possibly can. And I don't find that sort of same character trait here in Canada. Agree or disagree?
I don't know. I don't think it's like a nationality thing necessarily, but I guess there is maybe a cultural difference. So I'm not American. I've never lived there or anything. I've traveled there many times, of course. I don't know. It's an interesting framing of it. I think I just have a lot of interests, a lot of different interests. And
how come you never went into your dad's family business? Why did you do what you do?
I think I considered it, in middle school, grade 8, but I found that math was too much of a struggle for me. So I think at one point, long time ago, I was probably considering it, but so I struggled too much with math, and I see it, come so easily to my son, who's going into engineering now, as he's finishing high school. And it's just interesting to see. I totally struggled with it, and I watch him. It's very, very natural, very easy for him.
It surprises me a little bit because you're very technical in nature. When we were putting the show together tonight, we had some technical challenges, and you kept going through potential solutions. I was lost. I said, I'm not quite sure where to go with this, but you kept going through those potential solutions and finally discovered it. So you do have a technical mind, no?
I'm interested in technology. I use technology in many aspects of my work, and I've written academically even about how I use technology in innovative ways in music therapy, particularly, and a community music project that I'm involved in. But that, I don't know, that's very different it's more like logic, I think, and problem solving than mathematics. There was something about, even like I remember being interested in finding calculus uh, fascinating, but it was a real struggle for me to like just to achieve like basic competence, and
Well, I'm gonna
I forgot all of it now because I haven't used it in such a long time.
I'm gonna guess though along the road, being that you've been playing music for so long, you're a
Yeah.
musician, you're a songwriter, and you're a producer. You've probably met those people who correlate notes with mathematics. No?
Yeah, yeah. I think. I mean, it's for some people. There does seem to be a correlation between mathematical ability and musical ability, but not for everybody. It didn't seem to be that case for me. And when you think about music, yeah, there's a mathematical architecture to music, right? But that's not calculus. That's basic arithmetic. That chords are. If you can count to 7, you can do harmony and and spell chords and all that kind of stuff, right?
Well, my guess is probably a bit more complex than that. I'm an artist, and I have met artists along the road
Yeah.
who make this direct correlation between the brushstroke, the color, the flip of the brush with mathematics. I don't
Oh
understand.
yeah. Whoa.
I
And
don't. I don't get it.
geometry.
I don't understand it, but I know they're out there.
Right. Well, yeah. So I think there's explicit and implicit ways that people understand it, right? So to like be good at math in the way that say like an engineer needs to be, or just to excel at like math in school, that's more of like an explicit um understanding of math and calculus and physics. But I'll give you an example of implicit. Watch like an old. I had this like I was watching like an old like 1940s film of like a virtuosic tap dancer, right? Back from way back in the day, and like really elaborate moves, and then like the sort of like the pièce de résistance at the end was tapping like up this ramp
Mhm.
and jumping off the ramp, doing a spin or something, and then landing like right on the beat, on the next beat, right?
Mhm.
So like a physics student could like calculate all the, if the pull of the gravity, and the resistance of the wind, and the force that he went up with. You know what I mean? Like you could calculate all the variables that need to for that dancer to land right on the beat, right? I don't know if that dancer had the skills or the capability to do that explicitly, right? Like, does he know all those formulas? Maybe not, probably not. But on an implicit level, he knows the physics because he jumps at the right time and he
Yeah.
lands on the beat.
I mean that's what a musician playing with a band is all about, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah, in some ways. But then you're getting into other things like it's one thing to be able to play, like have a certain technical proficiency on your instrument, but it's a whole other thing to know how to listen to the gestalt of the group, and to constantly play and adjust what you're doing, not usually consciously, because it comes through the training of listening. Like a good musician isn't just about technique and finding the right notes. It's also about that ability to really deeply listen to the other musicians that you're with, unless you're just like a solo musician, right? But most of the time, most musicians are playing with other musicians to some degree, and that cultivated skill of listening is so vital, and can take some people do it very, very naturally without any thought, and other people have to train that ability to greater and lesser extents depending on the person.
So you're part of a band which is called Jaffa Road. You were the
Yeah.
founding member. It's phenomenal band. Again,
Oh, thanks.
being nominated twice for Junos.
Yeah.
When you listen to depending on the gig, depending on the song, the 5 or the 6 or the 7 or the 8 people in your band, one of who's on keyboards, you're on bass. Sometimes you have
Oud.
horns
I'm
and
on oud
you're on oud.
or guitar. Yeah.
Are you hearing a symbiosis, a gelling of all those sounds, or can you hear them separately as well?
Oh, both. I mean, I think no, definitely both. And I think any musician would hear both, and maybe most music aficionados would hear both, and maybe more naive, less trained listeners might not be able to hear either the whole or each of the separate parts. But no, at any one moment, I can choose to hear either the whole thing or any individual component of it. And yeah, and one of the things that's exciting for me about playing in that band and listening as a fan to other bands that maybe have a similar method is that I truly think that the sum is greater than the parts. Everyone in the band is a great musician, um, but there's something quite special to me when it all comes together, and the sum is definitely much bigger than the parts on their own.
So you're playing a song, let's say you're recording it,
Mm-hmm.
and you start off and you're listening to the various different parts.
Yeah.
You want to make sure that the production is coming together in the way that you set out that it should
Mm-hmm.
or somebody else did.
Yeah.
What happens in your brain? What happens in your mind when you switch to hearing the orchestral sound?
It's a good question. Like for me personally, I just find it
Do you say to
immensely.
yourself, okay, Aaron, now I want to hear it all at once? Is there a voice in your head or what happens?
Well, when it's my own music, like if you're talking about a recording, it's
Either or.
it's different for live and for recording, because in the recording process we tend to take a you know bite at it in small bits and over a very long period of time. So it comes together very slowly, and by the time it's finished, I've heard it in so many times and so many different permutations. But when you hear that final, when you get like the final mix back from the mix engineer, or when I get the final mix back from the mix engineer, or I'm actually in the mix studio getting that final mix coming together, it's very exciting. In part because for us, it's typically a very long and drawn out process because everybody's so busy with so many different things. But there is something that's just like immensely satisfying to finally hear that vision come together. And sometimes it's very close to what was imagined at the beginning, and sometimes it's very far from the original idea. Because typically I get the ball rolling with the songs by making rough demos in my home studio where I'm combining the instruments that I can play with virtual instruments that I have access to and sample libraries and so on. Sometimes the demo is very, very rough. Sometimes I make, for my own fun, I make it more elaborate and closer to the finished project. But it's always a totally different thing by the time these amazing real musicians get their input and their hands on it. So there's some songs were pretty close to my original idea, and then other songs have actually, frankly, kind of blown me away because I get to work with this incredible cast of musicians who take that demo and just really take it many, many levels beyond,
When would you do a live recording to tape? Not do it piece by
We haven't
piece.
done much of that. We've done one. It's on. You can find it on YouTube. I mean, during the pandemic, when there were no live concerts, we had the opportunity to perform live in studio with no audience, with beautiful lighting and multi-camera shoot and post-production edit and that sort of thing. So that was for the Small World Music 25th anniversary festival. That was in 2021. So we did an hour long concert program with no audience, just us and the cameras. So that was live to tape, and that was really fun. Production wise, I think it's still quite good. I quite like it. But because it's live, and so everyone's only playing one thing at a time, when we produce an album, I might have 4 or 5 layers of guitar and synthesizers and so on. So it's a different kind of production, but the songs are still the songs, and they're
Well,
played.
what a language you have, Aaron.
What do you
Like,
mean?
you speak English.
Yeah, and a little bit of Hebrew and a little even less Spanish.
and
Yeah,
you speak music.
and I speak music. Yeah,
And when you get into a room with your musician who speaks music as well,
yeah.
it it's a bond, right?
It is a bond. But years ago I had a great experience with some friends who were not trained musicians at all. In fact, and they weren't really even very good as musicians, but I thought they were excellent songwriters.
Yeah.
And because you can be an excellent songwriter without necessarily being a great musician. And that was fun. So they didn't have that language that, like, everyone in Jaffa Road is very, they're very schooled musicians. So we can all speak we can speak in technical terms about music, and people know what people are talking about. But there was the other side of that same coin, was that when I've had the opportunity to work with someone who's a talented songwriter, but isn't trained as a musician, doesn't have that language, and you have to find other ways to communicate musical ideas and help them realize their vision of their songs. That's a different kind of satisfaction. That's pretty fun also.
I mean, what's beautiful about you is that you've traveled on many roads and you've stopped at many an inn or motel, musical motels. And as an example, you and I met, it's got to be close to 25 years ago.
That's right.
It's when you were really starting out your musical stuff. I had just started an organization called Via Hafta, and yes, was the route that I went more often than not. When people ask me if they could, launch into a project that would help the homeless, as an example, I say, yeah, that sounds good. Let's do it. Later on, things changed dramatically, and that's when it became a real drag. But you approached me and you wanted to teach kids living in a shelter hip hop music, but not only to teach them, but to allow them the opportunity to develop their own hip hop. Right?
Correct. Yeah.
Now that must have been
in improvised music therapy sessions. Yeah, we did that. So yeah, if I remember correctly, first of all, this is 20 years ago exactly. This would have been 2003. So 21 years ago. If I remember correctly, I did approach you like that because I was already working at Nami Res, which was or is the adult shelter, and then next door they had Tamavut, the youth shelter. I know Nami Res is still there. Is Tamavut still there? Do you know?
I'm not sure.
It's anyway. And I was doing, and they wanted, and so we started doing music therapy at Tamavut. And then, if I remember correctly, you through Veahafta helped raise some money that we needed for equipment to make that happen.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if you know this, but that ended up being the foundation of that work. Ended up being the foundation of my master's thesis when I was doing my master's degree in music therapy, which then became, several years later, became the foundation for 2 chapters that I was invited to write for the first music therapy academic textbook about rap and hip hop music.
Yeah.
And what was so striking to me, and one of the many things that motivated me about that work 20 years ago now, was at that time, hip hop music was the most commercially significant part of the music business, right? It still is big. I don't know if it's as big as it was then, but back then hip hop was, without a question, commercially the most significant, successful kind of music. And at that time, numerous academic disciplines had just a huge wealth of academic articles, academic inquiry into this cultural phenomenon of hip hop. African American studies, ethnomusicology, popular music studies, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Like many, many different
Yeah.
academic disciplines, except absolute silence. There was nothing in at that time from the field of music therapy examining the cultural phenomenon of hip hop and the therapeutic potential of it. Nothing. It was like there was nothing written. I thought that that's strange. How could it be that the most commercially significant form of music is completely
Yeah.
ignored by the academic side of music therapy? So with a bit of your help, I was one of the pioneers in that field, and that was sort of a little bit groundbreaking, that work that I did at Pumavut in that regard. And then it became part of a book called Therapeutic Uses of Rap and Hip Hop, which was edited by Professor Sue Hadley, an American music therapy professor, and she invited articles from about a dozen people that were doing that type of work back then.
You know what fascinates me about that story that you just told?
Yeah.
It's the tapestries that we create in life, right?
Mm-hmm.
Somewhere along the road, I met Aaron Lightstone, right?
Yeah.
And you were young and you were naive and you were just starting things off more or less.
Yeah. So
And
are you.
Yeah, and so was I. And we came together and we brought our energies, together as one. I was able to raise some cash and you were able to implement, and it did something for both of us. And
Mm-hmm.
that's ours for life. That's ours forever.
Yeah. Oh yeah. No, I mean, look what that led to. I mean, for me, just to be able to have done that research, for my master's degree, to take that direction, and then to have that to my credit, that I was part of that groundbreaking book as a result. Like, you don't know where that snowball kind of ends, and as a music fan, like, I'm not even that. I mean, I don't dislike hip hop, but I don't go out of my way to find it. I'm not like a huge aficionado of it. But as a cultural phenomenon, I find it absolutely fascinating, because that's part of my interest is like, I get turned on by the aesthetics of a musical style, and I want to learn it, and I want to grab hold of it and figure it out, or there's like a whole cultural phenomenon around a particular kind of music that can be endlessly fascinating, even if one isn't necessarily so turned on by the aesthetics of that particular
What
form
what
of music.
what I think is compelling about you, the way you approach music, is that it's all a fusion. And let me offer up an idea and tell me if I'm accurate or not. Somewhere along the road, you decided you want to start a band, right? You
Mm-hmm,
called it
mm-hmm.
Jaffa Road.
Yep.
And the description of that band, the type of music that you play, it's a fusion of 5 or 6 or 7 different type of musical genres.
That's right. Yeah.
Hebrew, Eastern, it's got
Jazz, Indian,
jazz. Yeah, go on, keep
yeah,
going.
rock, reggae, a little bit here and there, all kinds of stuff. Because the band members, everyone is such an eclectic listener of music, and everyone in the band has had also like a very diverse range of experiences in terms of what other types of artists or genres they've played with. So it all comes together in this very natural and organic kind of mishmashy kind of way. And it's not we try not to make it contrived, like, like, oh, let's like mash up reggae grooves with Middle Eastern melodies just for the sake of it. It sometimes can be like that, but it's not really. We try to avoid that, and just like what serves the song, what serves the composition, and what are we gonna, how is it going to come together in a unique way for us, because everyone's bringing sort of different proportions of those experiences to the mix, and blending it together,
Right, but the chronology of this is not that I knew 5 or 6 or 7 or 8 phenomenal musicians. I brought them together, and they were all very eclectic in their musical tastes. So therefore, we fused together a bunch of different genres. It's the other way around. You looked
Yeah,
for those people, right?
more or less, yeah, or we found each other in strange ways.
But my question to you is: most musicians that I know, they have a rock band or they have a
Mhm.
blues band, and they
Right,
stick
right,
with that, right? That's
right,
not what you
right.
did.
No, no.
How come?
How come? That's a good question. I think because I'm more interested in something that is either defies genre or is beyond genre, or has those like familiar elements, but at the same time you can't quite place it, and then every once in a while we might have a song that um fits a little more neatly into a genre. Like if you listen to our Ben Adam, it sounds like a southern rock blues kind of song with not too many other influences. Or if you listen to Yonati Zivi Fateh, it sounds like a contemporary band playing some version of Middle Eastern Arabic music, but with Hebrew lyrics. But many of the other songs are just, there's just so many different elements coming together that it's not really clear what genre is this. And for me, that's kind of fun, just to having things come together in that uh, in that way, you know.
So when you're producing music, I have here in front of me the lyrics to Ya Allah,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah,
And I love that you did this. I love that you draw upon lyrics that may be 500, 600 years old.
yeah,
In this case, these lyrics are adapted by Aaron yourself
yeah.
from a poem by Rabbi Israel Najari, a
Najara.
15th Najara, a
Yeah,
15th century mystic poet who lived in what is now Svat, Israel, and Damascus, Syria. So, do you also write your own lyrics?
yeah. That's a newer endeavor. On there, do I have any lyrics? Yeah, there's no Aaron Lightstone lyrics on the 3 albums that are out, but there's at least 3 songs that were written or co-written by me within the lyrics on the next album that's in production right now.
Okay, but let's stay with Ya Allah, Ya Allah. Here's a couple of lines of it. My doe, come to my garden. The pomegranates are in bloom, and my vines have flowered. Come, my beloved, hasten your steps, eat of the choicest fruits. Classic 15th century poetry, right?
Yeah,
I
but
would,
I think it even harkens back to the Shir Hashirim. I think he's trying to write poetry in the style of Shir Hashirim, which
and
is
what is Shir Shirim?
that's the Hebrew epic love poem that's part of the Tanakh,
The
or
Bible, the
the Bible,
collection of books
Song
in
of
the Bible.
Songs. Yeah, yeah,
So you decide yalla yalla yalla, and you're going to produce this, and you're sitting downstairs in your basement, which is where you are now.
yeah.
Stunning backdrop,
Thanks.
by the way.
Thank you.
Gorgeous guitars, and so all of a sudden, does the music slowly start playing in your head? Is that what happens?
I don't remember exactly how it worked with that one, but I do remember hearing or learning that the text from that song, if I'm not mixing it up with a different one, hopefully I'm not, because we have a couple Najara pieces on that last album. where we wrote new music for Najara poetry. And I might be confusing two pieces, but if I remember correctly, um, I learned that these pieces of love poetry that he was writing became uh, central to the chuppah ceremonies in Eastern communities, like old Jewish communities in Afghanistan.
The wedding ceremony.
Yeah, the wedding ceremony in Afghanistan and India, Mumbai. And again, I could be confusing this with Yonati Zivi Fateh, or it might even be the same story now. I have to look it up to be sure. But either way, both of them were by Najara and were well used text in amongst Eastern Jewish communities. And that, I don't know, there was just something about that backstory that I found very interesting, aside from the fact that I really liked the lyrics. And then I went and I listened to some contemporary musicians playing like the old traditional melody of of what the Afghanistan Jewish community would have maybe played way back. I thought, oh, this is interesting, and I thought, okay, let's take, even though our music sounds nothing like that song, particularly sounds nothing like that at all. The idea it was the inspiration where I thought, oh, that's interesting. We can make a cool rock song out of this, and our version of Yalla Yalla, our melody for it, our interpretation is, when we talk about the different genres, there's some Indian music in there, and there's some like West African desert blues kind of influence, but essentially it's a rock song. And yeah, and so then I start to sort of find drum beats and loops that are going to be interesting for me to compose to, and I start recording demos with that. But then Rakesh, our incredible drummer, he'll eventually, those loops that I'm composing to, we throw them out and he plays for real in their place, that kind of thing. But yeah, I have an idea. Like, I start with an idea of what's the overall aesthetic. And I do remember with that one, when you hear the B section, the bridge, Shuvi Eli, I'm not bringing it to. I do remember working on that with Sundar and Justin, my two bandmates, who are both very, very experienced and skilled in Indian and jazz music. And I don't remember the original melody that I had for that section, but they took that. I remember them taking that original melody and just twisting it around just a little bit, just enough, make it different, make it better than what I had, so it's truly a collaboration, and then I don't sing on that track. I sang on the demo, of course, but Tamar sings the main lead A section, which is an incredible singer, and Sundar, the jazz musician, he's an incredible singer as well, and I just think he sounds so beautiful on that B section. Yeah, but he doesn't speak Hebrew. He's not Jewish. I had to teach him the Hebrew pronunciation, but I think he sounds fantastic there. So that's the kind of ways that we collaborate.
I'm a writer.
Yeah, I know. Yeah,
and yeah, thank you.
Yeah,
and I, it's funny because I've been reading some classic literature lately, and I look back on my own writing and I go, you know what? I'm not really a writer. Does that ever happen to you?
Well, yeah, but I can call myself a composer, and then I go listen to Bach, and then it's like, really,
yeah,
call yourself a composer?
But as a writer, what happens is I take lots and lots and lots of copious amounts of notes, ideas, really. And so, as an example, I've been learning about the Jews coming out of Egypt, and there's an idea amongst the rabbis that we were all at Mount Sinai.
Yeah,
we were all there. So I saw you there,
right?
Yeah. You could have dressed nicer, by the way. And that idea resonated with me as a tremendous idea for a short story, that I meet you there and people that we know. So I jot it down in my little yellow folders in my phone. I once heard a musician interviewed, and he said at that time that music, he hears a lot of music in his head on a regular basis. And sometimes he'll come up with an idea for not a song, but a piece of a song, and he'll store it. He'll store it.
In his mind, or a voice memo, or what does he do?
So I think in
Doesn't matter.
his case, he stored it up here.
Oh, wow, it's impressive. I forget. I remember. I have ideas all the time, and then I
So what do
forget.
you do? Do you record them?
If I'm organized, sometimes some good ideas often, don't get caught. They're like the fish that got away.
Right, right. But when you are producing a song, do you then draw upon those files?
Oh yeah, sometimes. Yeah, right now I'm actively trying to get repertoire together for the next album. So, yeah, I've got right now I have an idea for a song, lyrics. Um, the lyrics are not by any means finished, but and I don't want to say too much about it yet. But I'm taking a Hebrew, very well known Hebrew text that'll be familiar to many Jews, whether they're practicing or not. Sort of a semi-liturgical thing. Anyway, and it's very timely. And then I'm constructing English lyrics that relate around it. So that might be the Hebrew will be the chorus, and then the verses will be in English. And then I've got all kinds of musical ideas that I'm just constantly testing out. Like I don't know yet what the sort of overall stylistic container or structure for this song is. So one night I might sit down with the guitar and try some like a interesting kind of bluesy thing with it. Maybe that could be kind of cool. Maybe I'll and then the next day I'll try out something totally different with the oud that's maybe more Middle Eastern, and then the next day maybe something that's I'm working with a brilliant co-writing a little bit with a brilliant calypso artist, so I might try something with a more calypso feel to see so anyway, so the point is, like, with that song I'm still like brainstorming. I don't know yet where it's going to land, except that I really want to do something with that particular text, you know.
You I'm assuming never get bored with your music.
No, it's hard to get bored with music because it doesn't matter like how much like nobody, I don't know any musician who's ever, like a serious musician who's satisfied with what they've learned, what level of proficiency they've achieved. And I know most musicians, most of the musicians that I associate with, I would say have achieved a level of uh, technical proficiency and so on that's beyond where I'm at, and and that pushes me, that keeps me growing. And but I don't know anybody who's like, I don't think I know anybody who's feels like they're done learning.
Yeah, my point really is when I speak to you and when I watch you and when I read about you and I get very excited about your music, an image comes into my mind of you opening up a toy box full of music and reaching inside with one hand and pulling out a bar of calypso music, like you said, then reaching inside again and pulling out some Eastern music, putting those down on a table, reaching in again, pulling out some Hebrew, ancient Hebrew music,
Hmm.
and then taking some of your glue,
Yeah,
right, or
yeah,
some of your tape, and then just
right.
tape them together. Like, to me, that's beautiful.
Well, it's something like that. And, like some of the great songwriters talk about that with how they've approached lyrics. Like remember in an interview, David Bowie explained how he would, like he would have a thing where he's just constantly writing ideas down, and most of them would be fragments of a song. None of them less like he
Yeah,
wasn't he wasn't like a Bob Dylan where a whole song just came to him and it was like he was taking dictation. So he had these ideas, and so what his technique was then at every periodically was to gather those ideas together, physically separate them from each other with scissors. So he'd make little strips of each independent idea, spread them out on a big dining room table,
very cool.
and then just move them around until song lyrics came together out of
Yeah.
these disparate ideas. Right?
Just to be mystical for a moment, Aaron Lightstone.
Yeah.
is the song there and he just figures it out?
Well, some people would say that.
Is that an
Um,
argument?
um, Sometimes I don't know. It's hard. I feel like sometimes there's like for me anyway. It's a lot of work, and some of the really great songwriters have talked about this. Like Bob Dylan has talked about certain songs that they literally just came to him
Yeah.
complete,
Yeah.
and all he had to do was take dictation. And he doesn't know how he did it, and he doesn't know if he can do it again, and he doesn't know who that person was who, when he 21 years old, was the vessel for that. And then you see like Leonard Cohen on the other hand talking about how um he was literally like banging his head against the wall trying to get the words of Hallelujah to fall
Yeah.
into place.
Yes.
Right. So I don't know. And I mean, in a mystical sense, it's nice to think of that. Oh yeah, like their songs are just out there waiting to be discovered, and some people are just more tuned into that frequency of the universe or whatever. And it seems like people like Bach, certainly, like when you study the music of Bach, there's something that does seem to be superhuman contained there within.
Aaron, what is an oud?
Oh, you want to see the oud?
Yeah.
The oud is the grandparent of the guitar.
Mhm.
These things here, they go back to maybe 2,500 years. I don't think it's known exactly, but some people would say Persia became the the main plucked string instrument in many Middle Eastern cultures. And so of course when the Moors invaded and took over Spain in the 800s, they took their culture with them, and then this instrument was part of that. And in Europe, in Spain, it eventually evolved and was modified and evolved into the lute when they put frets on it and made the fingerboard much wider. And then the lute eventually evolved into the guitar as we know it today. So it's the grandparent of the guitar. Not
Why did
very
you why did you learn it?
I don't remember exactly when I really heard it for the first time, but there was just something about the sound of the instrument. That just really drew me in.
What is it about the sound? Tell me something about it.
I don't know. I don't know if there's words for that. That's why we have to play music, because sometimes words don't express. You can't really describe a sound like this accurately. If I say I saw Avrum today, and he was wearing a blue hoodie with white lining. Oh, it was a Toronto Maple Leafs jersey, and it's blue, and it has blue Toronto Maple Leafs embroidered in blue, and it has a white maple leaf and a white trim. Somebody who hasn't seen it can probably get a pretty accurate idea of what that shirt looks like, right? Because the words are descriptive and accurate. But if I say someone's never heard, if someone's never heard the oud, and you say, "Oh, I heard Aaron Lightstone play the oud today, and it was deep and resonant and earthy," do they know? Can they make a mental image of
No.
what?
But if I said to you or somebody that sound is very mystical in nature,
Yeah, I agree.
I don't know if you can get a mystical sound like that out of a bass guitar.
Depends on the player and maybe the quality of the instrument. But no, there is something special about this. It's got a very ancient. It is a very ancient design of an instrument. That said, uh, although it's an ancient design of the instrument, some of the top luthiers in the Middle East right now, and some of them are here in North America, but from the Middle East, have been making very subtle and design modifications to the instrument in recent decades that maybe only a luthier or a player would notice. But the way this instrument is made now in the 21st century is not how it was 100 years ago. And this is a tremendous, this particular instrument is just like tremendous. It's from Yildirim Palibik, I believe is how you pronounce his name, in Turkey. And
can you play blues on that at all?
it's different though.
Can you play rock and roll?
With a band, not solo. I mean, I could rip a solo in a band setting, but I can't really communicate, as I can't anyway. As a solo oud player, I can't really communicate rock and roll with this instrument. I need the guitar.
What about classical music? Can you play classical on that
oud? Like Western classical music.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't have any at my fingertips, but yeah, there's some. Okay. It's possible. Like there's a great one of the greatest living young virtuosos of the instrument. Much technical proficiency is way beyond mine. Joseph Tawadros. He lives in Australia, and you can find videos of him on YouTube playing Vivaldi concertos with an orchestra, but on oud instead of mandolin, I believe they were originally written for, or violin. So yeah, I don't play classical music on it, but it can be done.
I wanna move into a different room, if you will.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
Of the Aaron Lightstone home.
Yeah.
One of the things that you do with your life is what's called music therapy.
That's right.
You do musical therapy, or have done it, with people in the final stages of terminal illness, palliative care.
That's right.
People are living with dementia, adults and children living with autism or on the autism spectrum, people living with severe physical disabilities, teenagers and adults in addiction recovery programs, individuals who have suffered traumatic experience such as sexual, physical, and emotional abuse and neglect. And today you're spending a lot of time on individuals with brain injuries.
Yeah, that's where my clinical focus has gone for the last at least 8 or 9 years now. Not exclusively, but almost all the work that I'm doing lately is in part of brain injury rehabilitation. So working with people who have had life-changing brain injuries, usually from a car accident or an industrial workplace accident, and then becoming part of their overall rehabilitation team, where they might have a rehab support worker, a physiotherapist, an occupational therapist, a speech language pathologist, and a neurologic music therapist.
Now there's a magic here, and you and I had a tremendous conversation earlier today about an individual whom you are working with, who has gone through a brain injury. And because of that injury, he cannot draw upon, he cannot express, or he cannot remember nouns.
Correct.
Okay.
Most nouns. Yeah.
Most nouns. So before we dive into what you're doing for him, how does that work in the brain? Does my brain know house? Does my brain know table? Is there somewhere in there where the brain says, okay, this is where your nouns are stored?
I think so. So I'm not an expert on neuroanatomy, but yeah, that's my understanding is that, yes, we do know though that different parts of the brain, distinct parts of the brain, are responsible for different functions, human functions, right? And in neurologic music therapy, we look at overall human functioning as being divided up into 3 big domains. We have our sensory motor skills, So that's like our movements of our digits, our gait, our ability to sense where our limbs are in space, all of these different types of sensory motor skills. We've got our speech language communication skills and our cognitive skills, which is then subdivided: attention, memory, auditory processing, visual processing, emotional response to a trauma like a brain injury or whatever the case may be, et cetera, et cetera. So we got three big areas. And then when you think about music as a behavior, think of music as it's a human behavior, something that's uniquely human, that human beings engage in. And evolutionary biologists have speculated about what is the survival benefit that music provides to human societies that engage in it, but we don't know for sure. The survival benefit of learning how to play a musical instrument is not obvious. But so why? So it's a bit of a mystery. Why does every human culture ever known, ever studied, have music and musical instruments of some type or another? And then we can see that music, when we engage in music, when we engage in musical behaviors, neuroscientists for some time used to think that just like a center of speech was found in the brain, and a center for gait was found, and a center for emotional regulation was found, at one time neuroscientists were searching for the music center of the brain. Where's the part of the brain where musical behaviors and musical perception reside? And what was eventually concluded through lots of interesting research was that there isn't one, because music is recruiting adjacent functions from all of the different areas. Like if you think about what's involved with learning how to play a musical instrument, for example, your fine motor skills are at play, your visual perception is at play because you're watching your teacher, your auditory perception is at play because you have to fine tune your auditory perception skills. Your memory is working because you have to remember all the intricate movements and the lyrics and the music theory, so nearly every piece of human functioning has to come together in a coordinated way to engage in musical behaviors. So music is forcing nearly every part of the brain into communication with each other.
Yeah, it's fantastic.
Right?
Fantastic.
And so when someone's had an injury, or some part of the brain is compromised due to an injury or a neurologic disease of some kind, the functions that reside in that part of the brain are going to be impaired, are going to be compromised, or even obliterated in some unfortunate cases, right? But with training, with practice, the brain, we have this neuroplasticity, that the brain is plastic. The brain is constantly adapting and rewiring itself in response to new experience and new learning and new experience in general. So with training, and it doesn't always happen, but most of the time it happens to some extent, when a function is lost because of an injury or a disease, neighboring areas can start to take over because the brain is plastic and malleable, right? So certain areas will take over a certain amount of that function.
It's like homeostasis.
Yeah. So unfortunately, with a severe brain injury, it's unlikely that we're going to get the person back to their pre-injury level of functioning. But it's also very unlikely that when the person engages in the work of rehabilitation, that they won't improve.
Okay. Let's turn this into the practical.
Yeah.
So you have this fellow, we'll call him Jim.
Yeah, let's call him Jim.
We'll call him Jim. Clearly his name's not Jim now. We'll call him Mike. No. Yeah. And Jim has lost his ability to draw upon nouns, right? Yeah. So you said to him, and maybe you can grab your guitar because I want to an interesting exercise. Excuse me for my cough today, folks. It's been around for about a month. Probably a lot of you have something similar. So, that's a beautiful guitar, man.
Yeah, this isn't the guitar I take to his sessions, but it's one I have.
Stunning. It's called the Dobry.
This is called a national guitar,
It's
invented
gorgeous.
by the Dobro brothers in the
Lovely.
1920s.
So this fellow Jim, you say to him, Jim, what is this?
Yeah, I say,
And
what is this? And the
yeah,
first time
yeah,
we
go on.
tried that, he would not be able to answer a question like that. He knows what
Would
it
he say?
is.
I don't know.
Well, I can't tell you that because he
I can't
knows
say.
what it is, right? But there's a disconnect in the between the concept of what this is and being able to express it
Okay.
by saying its name. And then I might say, well, what's my name? Like pointing to myself, because we've known each other now for several weeks. I'm one of his rehab team people, but Aaron is a noun. It's a proper noun. So he's like, yeah, no, I know who you are, but I don't know your name.
Okay. And you do what?
So then we have a technique for this called melodic intonation therapy, MIT, melodic intonation therapy. So there's more to it than this, but the short version of the story is that we create a one phrase song with the target words, and we repeat it many times. So I might make a song. I made a song. So I would say, Aaron plays guitar. Aaron plays guitar. And I say, listen to me sing it once, and then you repeat it. Listen to me sing it once, back and forth, numerous times.
Okay.
And then I say, what is this? He goes, of course, it's a guitar.
Right. Is that what happens?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And then, but then it only means something if he can then do it later outside of the context of the music, right? So when I'm arriving next time and we haven't done any music yet, and I say, what is this? He goes, guitar. Then I know it's been successful. But there was another example where it's a process. And so for some mysterious reasons, some of these nouns, one session and they stick. And then I come back next week and what is this? Guitar, no problem. And then it sticks. It's done. We're done with that word. We don't need to work on it anymore. Other words, for whatever reason, 3-4 sessions of repetition before it sticks. And then what's really interesting is when a word is taking more than one session, we do weekly sessions in this guy's case. When words take more than one session, what's really interesting is that I can give, if I can see that he's struggling, I say, what is, let me give you an example. I'm looking at my notes here. If I say, oh, okay, here's a good one. So this individual has he has a sauna in his house and he really likes to use it. But he can't say the word sauna, right? Because it's a noun.
It's a noun.
So I go, the song is, I like to sweat in the sauna. That's the song. I like to sweat.
I said in the sauna.
I like to sweat.
Yes, I do.
In the sauna. Okay, so that's the song. Right? So then if it's maybe it's the second or third week that we're working on, I say, and I point to the sauna, I say, what do you call that room over there?
Yeah.
He's going, I get hot. I get hot in there. It's really hot. And then, yeah, but what's it called? What's the noun? And I can see, you can hear like the wheels turning. And then I go, and maybe sometimes only one time of playing it instrumentally. And then he'll go, oh, sauna.
Ah, beautiful. Beautiful, right? Man. I love that.
And then you try to close the gap, so that, and it's interesting, it's mysterious. Why does this word take one practice session and then the other word takes several? But then what starts to happen is we're well into this work with this guy, and we've done a bunch of words. But the family reports, and he reports that other nouns that we haven't worked on are now spontaneously, slowly starting to appear in his speech.
And we would say that's because of The
because some
pervasiveness
other
of music
uninjured part of
in his brain.
some other uninjured part of the brain is starting to take over that function.
Is that the same thing, Aaron, as an Israeli coming to Canada, never spoke a word of English, comes here, watches a ton of TV, learns a ton of music, all of a sudden their English is flourishing?
Yeah, well, it's a similar concept. Now, if you're talking about someone with a healthy, uninjured brain, I mean, then it's just sort of like the normal learning process, and the language center of the brain is highly stimulated in that case, and the language part of the brain is now responding to that new experience, to that new stimulation, by rewiring itself so that that person who previously didn't have the ability to speak English now has the ability to speak English, right?
I have a buddy
Yeah.
who could tell you every single Rasta song
Yeah.
from the 70s and 80s, every single lyric.
Yeah.
He can't remember a damn thing otherwise in terms of his learning, his studying, his prayer, but he can recite to you all of the songs that the great Rastafarians sang, the reggae music, and not only that, rock and roll too, from the beginning of the song until the end.
Yeah. So I would guess correct me if I'm wrong, but he probably learned those songs during adolescence,
Yeah.
late teens, early 20s.
Yes.
Yeah. Right. So what's going on there is this is also why most people, not everybody, but most people think that the best music ever made was the music that was popular when they were in their late teens and early 20s, and everything that came after sucks.
Yeah, that's very true, isn't it? I know.
Doesn't matter who you ask. I mean, of course there's lots of exceptions, but in general, it's a fair generalization. So that the music and the lyrics in particular, from that stage in life, are stickier in the memory, and elicit a more intense uh, sensation of pleasure when we hear them. And the going theory for that is that because when we're at that stage of life, emotions in general are just much more intense because of hormonal development, and hormones are definitely big part of brain chemistry. So because of that hormonal response, because of that music being ingested into the system at that particular stage of life,
Hmm.
you're not going to get that same combination of ingredients for most people at most other stages of life. So that music has made a much more indelible impression on his memory, and on his likely on his emotions. That's why you're much more likely to have an intensely um, pleasurable emotional response to music from your youth than new music that's completely unfamiliar to you now. Even if you like it, right? You're probably not going to like it as much as,
That's very true.
right? And there's of course lots of exceptions, but it's a pretty reliable general rule, right?
Aaron,
Yeah.
in conclusion to our wonderful interview,
Yeah.
I want to ask you about the music that you played in palliative care environments.
Yeah.
So you were called many times when somebody was very sick and dying
Hmm.
to play music to them.
Correct.
Why would they call you?
Well, because I was on staff in the palliative care department
Okay, good.
at
So
the hospital.
they had your number, but why? I'm there with my great grandmother. She's
Yeah.
very old. She's dying. Immediately, I decided, okay, I'm going to call Aaron Lightstone to come in and play music to her. Why would I do that?
So the way well, it was more that it was more the model of care more was that I was working on the palliative care unit of the hospital, and so my service would be offered to everybody who wanted it. And in the palliative care unit at Sunnybrook, where I was working at the time, to be admitted there, people had to have a terminal prognosis. I can't remember if it was 3 months or 6 months at this moment, but in any case, they're not, although they're very ill and they're actively dying, in most cases, they're not dying tomorrow or next week, right? They've got 3, 4, 5, 6, sometimes more months. So, but they're hospitalized. They're under all kinds of palliative medicine. So we there's no more attempt to cure or ameliorate the situation. It's just to keep them comfortable. Keeping them comfortable entails controlling physical pain, but also psychosocial well-being. So part of that is that the music therapist is just trying to establish a relationship with every patient on the unit and offering them some kind of psychosocial respite, psychosocial benefit through engagement in music. And so when they're more well, when they're in the earlier days of palliative care, they often could be quite active in terms of being able to choose songs and sing along and be actively participating in some way. And then, of course, at the end stage, when people are very, very close to the end of life, their participation is much more passive, if at all. But even in those cases, even if people are beyond consciousness and beyond being able to say, yes, I would like you to come play some music for me, the family is often still there. And then that very final kind of service of palliative care music would be offered to the family. Do you want me to come in? And I see it's a very difficult time. In most cases, we already had a relationship through being around for a few weeks or few months. And then at that point, do you want me to come in and improvise some calming music?
Now you
For the
had
patient, or for the patient and or their loved ones, their family.
you had an awakenings experience, didn't you?
What do you mean awakenings? Like,
Oh, you remember the movie Awakenings, where
yeah.
the patients kind of opened their eyes and
Yeah.
came out of that unconsciousness? I remember
Yeah.
you told me this story a long time ago
Oh, I don't
that
remember.
there was a fellow that you were playing music for who was basically unconscious. And when you
Yeah.
would come in there at some point and play, he would open his eyes.
Oh, so I'm not sure exactly which story you're thinking, but that may not have been a palliative care thing, because with the palliative care, sometimes people would be really near the end and mostly unconscious, and maybe the music would cause them to open their eyes and have maybe an extra interaction with their loved ones that maybe wouldn't have otherwise have occurred. But I think you're also thinking about, like, I maybe have told you about I've had a couple cases in brain injury rehab work where the person is so severely injured that we actually don't know, or we're not sure if they're in a vegetative state or a minimally conscious state. And these are technical medical terms that have that to the untrained eye and even to the trained eye can look very, very similar, but there's very significant differences for legal and organ donation and prognostication differences between a vegetative state and a minimally conscious state. And there have been some case studies cases where I've been involved in, case studies that I've read where music therapy can have the potential to awaken somebody just enough from one state to the next to demonstrate that, we thought they were in a vegetative state, but actually they're in a minimally conscious state, because the stimulation that we're providing them with through music therapy is more emotionally salient than, say, clapping your hands behind their head to see if they show any kind of response. That's very different than if you improvise a song with their name in it or their loved one's name in it. they might actually have a still a very subtle response, but something that shows you that there's maybe more consciousness there than was otherwise apparent.
You've been with a couple of people who passed away while you were playing.
Yeah, that happened not many times, because if you think about it, you're in the hospital, you're working 9 to 5, they're there for 3 months, a week to 6 months, and make a relationship with them and offer them that service. Think of all the things that have to then align for the music therapist to be there with that patient at the actual moment where they took their last breath. That exact scenario didn't happen to me that many times, but it happened to me enough times that it's very memorable, because it's a very mystical and powerful experience to be watching somebody there who's taking their last breaths. Until they take their last breath, you don't know which breath is the last one, right? Because there's often long pauses in between, and the music is being improvised, often sort of in sync with their breathing, so that their breathing becomes part of the music. And you're playing this very, or the way I approached it anyway, this sort of ambient, drony kind of this kind of stuff, And at some point, it's the last breath. It's very powerful. And any time that happened to me, it's as much for their family and their loved ones as it is for the patient, because we don't know at that stage. Consciousness is obviously very mysterious and unstudied. We don't know.
So you would just leave the room. You would leave the room, I imagine.
Eventually, yeah. Yep.
Aaron Lightstone, thank you so much for this interview. This is the second one that we've done the last couple of years. I enjoy every minute.
Story that I thought you'd appreciate, though, that I got to tell you.
Please tell me.
In 2003, when I was working at Wehrhafta, and I had the opportunity through your initiatives to visit Guyana 3 times. Very interesting country. You never got there, right? Or did you ever get there? You personally?
No, I
sent a lot of people there.
I just send people, yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, one of those trips was one of those trips, of course, was the medical mission, but there was another one where it was like more of an educational mission, cross-cultural exchange, and I was responsible for a group of late high school, early university students in Guyana. Anyway, one of those students from 2002 or 2003, I'm not sure, was a young woman named Dana Sipos, who was, I think at the time, was just learning how to play the guitar. And nowadays, she's a fantastic songwriter. Beautiful songs. And last month, she had a showcase at a music conference in BC called Pacific Contact in Kelowna, and I was speaking. I was giving a presentation at the same conference, and when she found out that I was going to be there, she thought, "Oh man, this is so cool." She thought she could save some money on airfare and hotel for her guitar player, so she asked me to sit in for her performance. And I thought you'd appreciate that, because it's such a full circle thing. Lives in Victoria. We met in Guyana 20 plus years ago through your work. And then just 2 weeks ago, there I was, I was on stage playing guitar back in her band, backing her up. And she's a fantastic singer and songwriter. You should really check her out. You should get her on.
There's a line on her website. I checked it out before the show. Yeah. And sometimes lines are so superlatives, they're so definitive. The line about Dana is, Dana coaxes silkworms out of their cocoons and spins them into songs.
Yeah. She's a really great songwriter.
What a beautiful line, eh?
Yeah, yeah,
Ah,
yeah. And you should hear the lyrics. The lyrics in her songs, man. They're
and her name is Dana Sipos, Sipos. Aaron
yeah, yeah,
Lightstone, lovely to be with you. Thank you so
yeah,
much for
man.
this.
Always great to chat with you.
As I said at the top of the show, thank you. As I said at
Yeah.
the top of the show, like you're really truly one of my favorite interviews, and you are, because every time we speak, it's really like creating a brand new world for myself, because the aspects of music which you express and which you share with us, I don't know, and most people don't know.
Hmm.
Most people have not been in the room with somebody who is dying, playing music to them for the sake of comforting them and their family. Most people have not used hip hop as a way of helping children who are not
Hmm.
living with their
You.
parents
Yeah, yeah,
come out
yeah,
of themselves and maybe create a life for themselves. Like what you do is magnificent. And I think there's an aspect of all of us, and maybe it's because of what you explained before about music in our brains, where we all love music, right? We all
yeah,
love music. And
yeah.
then
It's very, very rare to meet somebody who doesn't have a connection to
have
music.
you
It
ever met
exists,
anyone?
but
Have you ever met anyone who
yeah,
doesn't like
it
music?
happens. It's rare, but it's they're out there. But
It's
it's
like people don't like chocolate. I don't trust those people. You know what I mean? But you present stuff to us, which honestly I could do a 5-part series with you,
yeah.
uh,
We could do that too sometime.
because it's so fascinating what you have to offer. And not only is it simply music for music's sake, but it's music for making our world a better place. So nicely
Yeah,
done.
we try. We try.
I want
Yeah.
everybody to dig very deeply into their own character, into their own souls, and find that thing, their own personal passion, which I call the zone,
Hmm.
and actualize it as best you can in life. Because whether it's Viktor Frankl, the great logotherapist, or whomever, people who talk about the development of the self, everybody says, find your passion, dig deeply, work it, enhance it, sculpt it, and share it with the world. And you're going to be a happier person.
And if you can make a career and a living from it, that's great. But don't think that you have to.
Well, that's true. Don't think you have to. It can be a sidebar of your life. That's true.
You know what I mean? Like I think it's an important little tag. Like if you can make a career living out of it,
And great.
that's really great. But if you can't, for whatever reason,
Yeah.
that shouldn't stop you from still cultivating that part of yourself.
You're right, actually, because we know that in history, there are people who came up with incredible inventions and they worked at the post office,
That's right.
right? So that's fine.
Yeah.
But do that. Look for your passion and take some inspiration from our dear friend Aaron Lightstone, who has done so much to enhance that part of his life and that part of his soul, which he's now passing on to his children and sharing with so many other people. So thank you so much for listening and for watching. I'm always so happy when people come to the show and spend time on it. And I'm hoping that you learned something from it. I hope that when you walked away from the show, you can say that your life is perhaps a little bit better than it was prior. So we wish you well. We'll be back with you in a few days with some more podcasts. Until then, have a beautiful night, a beautiful weekend, and we shall see you soon.